Go ahead, James.
Okay, I was talking about stuff to read.
Oh, I should probably... you're talking about things that people should read? Okay. Is this one of them?
No, these are not.
These aren't them. Okay, so that's not what you're talking about.
I just decided to introduce the topic informally. I haven't written the stuff up. I was writing a lot of it this morning or overnight, whatever. So we're talking about great books, and starting with what most people consider the greatest books, greatest in terms of influence. I wouldn't say anything about the greatness of literary value or greatness in terms of actually of so aesthetic value, greatness in terms of ethical value. Most of these traditions are, despite what fellow travelers like Karen Armstrong would have herself, sadly, first believing and everyone else believed after her. Most of these traditions are awful, absolutely awful, inexcusably awful. Yeah, it's just the way it goes. Some are at the ethical level of communism and Nazism, fascism. That's just the way it goes. I don't believe in any of them. And ultimately, amongst the great books, I'm going to recommend Das Kapital, not the Communist Manifesto. That's just like a popularization, really short sort of thing. You got to know what communism is about. You might as well find out what it's about. So I'm just going to recommend reading the first part of Das Kapital. As I recall, there are 3 parts. It doesn't lighten the load because the biggest part is the first part. And you might as well go with the official Russian translation into English. You used to be able to get that subsidized at comic book stores. And, it's amazing. You get Noam Chomsky saying, we've got to be 10 times better than them. And them in this case being the commies. I used to go to the comic book store in Toronto. What's it called? Progress Bookstore? I can't remember what it was called. It shut down pretty quickly after the end of the Cold War. But you could actually get subsidized literature, foundational literature in communism for almost like a song. Which is like what Christians used to do. I ended up getting about 60 copies of the Bible in whole or in part. I ended up with 60 in whole or in part. And that was in the 80s when they were kind of subsidizing this stuff. Canadian Bible Society, whatever it's called. But then they just started charging an arm and a leg, And it's like, I'm going to kind of channel Bono. The God I believe in, mister. Oh, that's what he says. But the God I don't believe in, mister, ain't short of cash. No. If you're not properly motivated, I think, to be a Christian if you're going around charging an arm and a leg for copies of the Bible. I was raised on that stuff. And my parents were poor, especially by comparison with the education that my dad had. I mean, he had a university education, a B.Ed, and went to Africa. I wasn't 3 times, but twice with him when before I grew up. Whenever he came back and started teaching here in Canada, and he had to because he suffered from malaria. He'd start at the bottom of the totem pole, had to work his way up. That involved most importantly for us kids, starting at the bottom and came to the summer scale. Why was that important to us kids? Well, there were 7 kids in the family. And my mom worked raising the kids. She was trained to be a teacher. She was a very good teacher. Anyway, so we've dealt with the Judeo-Christian tradition. And actually, it's not a bad transition to go into Marx. He, like Islam, is a throwback, even though his family was a throwback to. His family was tried to convert to Lutheranism. He claimed to be an atheist. Funny thing is, he set up one of the most intolerant religions in the world, presumably with no God. Maybe his God was history, I don't know. But his is not part really of the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's part of the, so he was Jewish. It's part of the Jewish Muslim tradition. Very much to do with the law. Not very much to do with love, even though you get idiots like Che Guevara saying communism is about love. Great love. And now, in China, wanted to de-emphasize Confucianism as a Chinese tradition. And at Confucius expense emphasized Moism. So Moti or Mozi was a Confucians hated him. Confucius came before Moti. Mencius, I think generally considered the second greatest writer in the Confucian tradition, came after Moti and couldn't stand Moti. And he said that the main thing wrong with Moti was he taught that horrible 4-letter word. It starts with L. What would that be? L-O-V-E, love. All you folks out there going around kidding yourselves, and what's worse, kidding other people, that every religion is about love. Confucianism is a classic counterexample. It's not the only one. In fact, it's almost every religion or belief system is a better way to put it. That includes communism, Nazism, so on and so forth. Is not about love, and some are in strong contradistinction to love. There's one where their sacred scripture goes, God loves not, da 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 da. God loves not, da 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 da. God loves not, da 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 da. Okay. It's not about love. Okay. So I consider Marxism as part of that Jewish tradition, and harking back to the harsh rule of law. Christianity doesn't belong to that tradition. It's a positive response to that overemphasis on law, and what's emphasized is grace, love, belief, faith. It's a misnomer. It's like really an contradiction in terms, an oxymoron to talk about the Judeo-Christian tradition. Jesus was a Jew, but raised as a Jew, but the religion that he founded is a strong strong contradiction. Judaism. It's just the way it goes. You disagree with me. You really can't disagree with me unless you've read have any sort of sway with me. Unless you've actually read the foundational documents. When I start quoting book, chapter, and verse. Just because you got a feeling. I remember one time I was talking about one of the major religions to a guy, a university student, and he wasn't a spring chicken anymore. Must have been in his 4th year, maybe 5th year. So I went through book, chapter, and verse and why this religion was intolerant. After all, he said, well, I know what you said, but I still believe it's tolerant and all that sort of stuff. Well, that means nothing to me. People believe all sorts of silly things. Step on a crack and you break your mother's back. Number 13's bad luck. They've got a special number, winning number for the lottery. Means absolutely nothing. I was, of course, far too respectful. I liked the guy, but and he was nice when he said it. But yeah, it's just after 4 or 5 years of university, people got to be prepared to back up what they've got to say. And not just go around saying, yeah, I know what you've said, but still I believe. It's hardly worth reporting. I don't know why I mention it. Actually, I do. But and seeing that was much of it was a response to communism. I want to mention Mein Kampf, My Struggle, by incidentally the same way the basic meaning of jihad is translated, struggle. Of course, jihad means so much more. There's the primary meaning of a word, not necessarily the way it's used in a particular thing. Jihad is, I don't know if there's maybe 1, 2 passages, and I'll have to do a study of it, in the Quran, where jihad is used in the original meaning of, no, it occurs more, but it's struggle. But generally in the Quran it's used to mean fighting, as in fighting war. That's the way it goes. Mein Kampf. So, important thing is to read it and understand that the Nazis were a socialist movement. National Socialists, that's what they call themselves, and that's what they were. Not capitalists, none of that garbage. Some capitalists, particularly armaments manufacturers who cooperated with them, Thiess and Krupp cooperated with the Nazis early on. Most of the capitalists weren't that thrilled about him. In the same way that the Republicans weren't thrilled about Donald Trump, but they knuckled under pretty quickly, knuckle-headed under. The Republican Party is absolutely shameful. They should have kicked Trump out of the party or started up their own party and divided the right-wing vote. But they were too thrilled with the prospect of exercising power, even though they're powerless under Trump. Absolutely hate Trump. He doesn't stand for the stuff represent, but they realized that they'd lost control of the vast majority of voting public in the United States after 2008 the economic meltdown that followed the stock market crash. And absolutely shameful. The Democratic Party at least stood up to the Russian agent, otherwise known as Bernie Sanders. They should have actually prosecuted that stupid chimp. He's the one of his agents was the one who first broke into the computers at the Democratic headquarters and stuff like that. It was actually someone working for Bernie Sanders. And someone with WikiLeaks or working with Julian Assange was kind of playing footsie when they were saying, he just showed us what we could do, like in terms of, in general terms. But my suspicion is he really opened up he had the key to opening up the law. So there he was, working as a spy. Theoretically, part of the Democratic Party. Absolutely shameful. So at least they kept him from running the Democratic Party into the ground, because that's what was scheduled. He was going to get thumped. There are a lot of people going around saying, oh, the polls show that head-to-head he'd do really well against Donald Trump. Yeah, because Fox Network was going around saying, oh, like giving Bernie Sanders positive kind of coverage, stuff like that. In many cases, he was the only Democrat, apparently, that they'd give coverage to. But what would happen is, then once he got nominated, then all of a sudden Fox Network, other right-wing networks would have turned on him and said, you call yourself a democratic socialist. I think that's, instead of saying social democrat, does that mean you're a socialist? And of course Bernie Sanders would have said, yeah, because the whole idea was not to get elected, but to tear the United States apart. If he'd gotten elected, Putin wouldn't have minded terribly much. But I can't see how he would have, because the polls seem to indicate, I'm amazed it's this high, maybe 40% of the people in the United States believe in some sort of socialism. Oh. Now maybe there's some people in the middle. I don't know if there's really that much. I gather something like 60% believe in capitalism. Are you going to get elected with 40% of the vote? You got to hope that that other 60% of the folks won't turn up to the polls. I understand. You get a guy running like Bernie Sanders, and they'll be asking, did you visit the Soviet Union back in the days of the Cold War? Oh, yeah. And they would have, the 60% would have come out in droves just to shut that chimp out. He would have got his hindquarters handed to him, as I said to my brother, was a big believer in Bernie Sanders and how good he was and all this sort of stuff. Absolutely shameful. His campaign manager back in 2016 was a protege of Paul Manafort, who ran for a while Donald Trump's campaign back then, and actually had run Yanukovych's campaign when he got elected, I think in 2011 or something like that. Long time, Manafort, long time collaborator with Putin and the Ruskies. So there we go. I'm going to look up, try to find something to read by Mao. The stuff that I've got by him in English translation, just little pamphlet-sized thing. Maybe you'll be able to get hold of his little red book or something like that. Don't bother with his poetry. so-called poetry. Here's how one of them goes translated in. Today we achieved history, like it's an account of a battle or something like that. Yeah, that sounds like doesn't sound like poetry, it sounds like political screed. Today we achieved history. Big deal. And maybe I'll recommend Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution. That might be what it's called. I'll check it out. It's been translated into English. And maybe it'll be Sto Delak. What is to be done? The title was stolen by Lenin from, what was the name of the guy? Chernyshevsky or something like that. Wrote it, by all accounts. Not mine, I haven't read it, even in translation. Russian novelist, revolutionary, whatever. What is to be done? So Lenin stole the title. And maybe that little screed was written maybe before the first Russian Revolution. Yeah, there was one, roughly 1905. So I think it's sometime between 1900 and 1905. Might have been later. I have to check that one out. But probably should read some Lenin. You'd be better off reading some John Lennon in terms of aesthetic delight. But it's not what this is about. This is great books and stuff that's had a great influence in terms of powerful, not great in terms of ethics, or much less aesthetics, or aesthetics much less ethics. So yeah, so that's a Judeo-Christian tradition, and I guess I have to include Nazis' Mein Kampf because it's socialism. Socialism comes out of the Christian tradition. It's not really the Jewish tradition. Now, what else? I think I might have a little more time left. There's so much written in the Buddhist tradition. I think I probably should start off with the Hindu tradition. What I recommend is looking at the Vedas. They're not long. There are not many. That's Vedas, V-E-D-A, and then pluralized. And it's stuff that's available probably at any self-respecting university library with a religious studies not faculty, but department. Bhagavad Gita as it is. So that's Bhagavad Gita. And you can get it in English translation with purports. In other words, commentary. Or you can get a larger edition, more recent edition, that has actually the original Sanskrit. And it's kind of good to look through something like that because it has a transliteration of the Sanskrit into Latin characters, and then it's got the translation, well, word by word translation, and then translation, smooth translation, and then purports, commentaries and stuff like that. That's Bhagavad Gita as it is. And you're recommended to look at least maybe at the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, put out by the same guy that did this translation I was mentioning of Bhagavad Gita. So that's one of the Puranas. There are about 17 or 18 of them that are considered something like foundational Hindu tradition. And again, I think the Srimad Bhagavatam consists of 50 volumes, and there's actually little of the original Sanskrit, but you'll get, let's say, a stanza of the original Sanskrit, transliteration, word by word translation, and then smooth translation and purports. And I'm not recommending that you go through all. I haven't been able to track these down. Oh well, actually I could have. I generally don't borrow books from the libraries, but I think they've got all of them here at the University Library. So the University of Lethbridge is not the biggest university in Canada, much less the world. So look through one or two of those books. See what George Harrison's guru. This is George Harrison's guru that did this. Put out these books, and of course both of those guys are long dead now. George Harrison died in 2001, I think, and I don't think what was his name, Swami Prabhupada or whatever, something like that. I don't think he even saw the 21st century. He didn't even get close. I think he died before 1980, somewhere around there, 76. So now you're getting one side, the Vaishnavite side of Hinduism, when you're looking at that. It's when you're looking at Swami Prabhupada, forgetting what he has one other name. Kind of glitching on. So it goes. Anyway, so we go from there to the Buddhist tradition. Lots and lots of stuff. The thing that I'd recommend is, so there's so many different things that you can look at. There's been so much written about it. But, maybe it's best just to go with Buddhist writings or something like that. Selection of Buddhist writings. It's put out by Penguin. It's, I don't know, maybe 400 pages. It's not as complete as it could be. It should be in terms of giving you coverage of Buddhism. We recommended to look at the English translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is will bore you know what out of you, but it's important to see what it's like and go from there. So that's one way of looking at one of the different traditions, the Tibetan tradition. There's a Japanese tradition, there's a Chinese tradition, maybe several Chinese traditions. There's a Southeast Asian tradition, and so on and so forth. Lots of different traditions. I'll deal at greater length with those sorts of things. Now, I'm recommending that you look at not so much the Iliad, but the Odyssey by Homer. You find out a little bit about the religion there. And maybe, I'm recommending that you get hold of the original documents. When they expose students at university to various religions, they start off with very little actual original sources. It's just a lot of general talk. And I don't recommend that. I mean, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to people